use for this is remember, rest, and re-engage. Remember, rest, and re-engage. We have a little bit of a look at the remembering part. So it is a good time, and it is a good thing to remember God's faithfulness, God's blessing to us. And so it is a great time to remember. Maybe you'll remember a good Christmas. Maybe you'll remember family being there. Take time to sit and appreciate the goodness of God. We are surrounded with God's goodness, even when we are faced with difficult times. But it seems that there's an old saying, the squeaky wheel gets what? All the oil. And some people live their lives like that. I've met people that in church even, not this church, but in other churches, they figure that's the way to do it. If you annoy the pastor enough, you'll get him to do what you want him to do. I don't know. You can talk to June whether that's a good system for me. I tend to think not. But sometimes we need to remember the goodness of God and be led into His presence in the best. So I encourage you. We've talked about the importance. We've talked about this. We forget. So the next part that I want to focus on, this is what I'm going to take the majority of time today, is about resting, because we're coming into a Sabbath period, and I believe that not just at the end of the year, we do this about once every, well, we certainly do it every January. In churches that I've been part of, we would do it every January and July. That every 6 months, 7 doesn't work quite as well. But we would try and introduce periods of time where it's not frantic. We try and tone down. I mean, thank you to those people who are taking part in the lead services and preach. That gives me a break and something different in January. So resting is important. I'll come back and spend more time on that. And we rest in order to re-engage. So what will happen? I want you to remember the goodness of God. I want you to rest well in January. And I pray that as we re-engage, as the new year starts at the end of January and the beginning of the normal time of life, that we will re-engage well with intentionality. So, let me read to you a very famous passage, and I want to draw your attention. Probably if you've heard me talk on this, it won't be new to you. And it says this: the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures, and He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for You are with me. Your rod and Your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. Now, a very famous passage, and I think it has 3 sections. It talks about this, it shows this 3 kind of snapshots. And one is of green pastures and still waters with the aim to restore our soul. Because it moves from that point and we find ourselves in the valley of the shadow of death. Now, I've met very few people that go, oh, goody. Isn't that great? Something to look forward to. Now, whether it's you may be fearful for your own mortality, or you may be fearful for a child or a family member's mortality, or maybe you're just, you come into the orbit, and this is not uncommon with pastors, as you go through the course of a year, you're constantly up alongside of people who are grieving, and you get to enter into in a small way. So we've got the snapshot, which is also pleasant green pastures and quiet waters. Then we've got a snapshot of the valley of the shadow of death. Not quite as appealing. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, the next snapshot is a big table and all your worst enemies are there. All the people you avoid as you walk down the street, all the people you say, God, give me strength. I pray that they're not at church all day. You wouldn't say that, would you? Oh, but I pray that I get a break from this person. They're there. A table before you in the presence of your enemies. That's not a particularly encouraging. So I don't pray that way. I haven't gone and picked out all the people I don't like and say, hey, we're having morning tea on a Wednesday. I hope you can make it. I haven't gone and done that. And I don't think I'm unusual or strange or unspiritual in that. The point that I want to make out of this is that there are hard times in life. There are times where we go places, and the psalmist says that's the valley of the shadow of death. That could be translated into any kind of situation, not just about death, but where you kind of say, I wish I really didn't have to be here. And the presence of enemies or that accusing voice or that continual complaint or that difficult neighbour or difficult child or family member, maybe you've experienced that Christmas time. My phrase that I've come up with is our ability to live victorious Christian lives in the valley of the shadow of death and in the presence of our enemies is directly dependent on our soul and our souls being restored beforehand. See, we've gotten into an unusual situation in Western civilization that this is called the weekend. The 2 days off, if it's 2 days anymore, is the week referred to it as the weekend. But for some cultures, this isn't the end of the week, this is the beginning of the week. And actually, a more Hebrew or Israelite type of way of looking at it is that the first thing you do in any day and any week is rest. So if you go back to Genesis, it says that God created, and then it says this phrase, there was nighttime and there was morning the third day. There was nighttime, there was morning the fourth day. In other words, a Hebrew or an Israelite way of viewing life started with sunset. Now, in an era where you didn't flick on an electric light, most of the activity soon petered out after sunset. That was about as far as you could work, and you'd probably scrape together a meal, but you wouldn't burn a candle or a lamp for the most of the night. In fact, there's some studies that have talked about the declining health in Western civilization that is linked to the advent of electric light. That we've gotten out of a normal rhythm of working and resting because we've been able to stretch the daytime to 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And they're saying this is having an adverse effect on people's health. So the good news is that as time goes on, we get to live longer. The bad news is, as time goes on, we get to live longer in a less healthy and emotionally stable way. Partly because we've lost the concept of resting beforehand. I hope that January for you is not just recovery time because you've had a tough year. I hope it's a time where God restores, refreshes, recharges your batteries, so to speak, so that you can move into the new year with enthusiasm and faith, hope and joy. And I think we need to come back to that. So part of the questions, when I was looking, one of the references that came up when I was looking about remember in Deuteronomy, I was going through, yes, remember all the good things, yes, There's one at the end that says, remember that you were once slaves in Egypt. And when you pull that apart, it's actually around Sabbath. And it says that those people were to, once every 7 days, have a break. They weren't to work, and their servants weren't to work, and their slaves weren't to work either. It wasn't just a Sabbath for God's people. It wasn't just for the religious. It was to rest everybody. And then Moses says, I don't want you to forget that you know what it's like. You know what it's like to be pushed to the point of exhaustion, to make bricks without straw, and to be beaten when you didn't meet the quota. He said, I want you to remember that so that you allow your servants, yourselves, to rest well. So, I want to encourage a Sabbath rest during January. It's not an obligation. I don't want to create guilt so that if you kind of go, look like I'm rested because people will be watching. You know, it's not an obligation that you have to do, but it's an opportunity that you have. And so every week, if I remember, I'm going to ask people to say, what have you done this week that has helped you to break the normal routine of the year and focus a little bit more on God? Maybe it'll be going for a walk on the beach or a walk with the park or a walk with the neighbours a bit more often than you normally do. One practical way, how many of you have a Bible app on your phone? Okay, that's about half. Most of you'll find that there's a whole lot of what they call plans, reading plans. They go anywhere from 3 days, 4 days, 7 days. Why don't you find one? And at some time, you might do 3 or 4 3-day plans over January. Just do something different. Maybe even choose a topic you wouldn't normally choose. See, Sabbath is about breaking the routine to hear God. It's not just doing less and putting your feet up. I think I've probably said enough, because I'm conscious that probably the greatest Sabbath breakers can be pastors. Not that Sunday has to be a Sabbath. In fact, I never even try on Sunday. But I find that for pastors and for church people generally, there is no commandment that is broken with less regularity and with so little thought of consequence as honour the Sabbath and keep it holy to the Lord. Here's an opportunity, not an obligation. Don't want to make it into rules and regulations, but an opportunity to do something different. Let me pray. Lord, we recognise that you instituted the Sabbath, time its root in creation before the fall. It's not something you needed to insert because we've run ourselves back. It was part of your perfect creation. You rested, not because you were wanting. You modelled for us what you wanted us to do. So in January, help us to be creative, help us to enjoy, don't allow guilt to become the motivator. And may we encourage others as we find you in surprising new ways.